In this next video from War, Art and Visual Culture Sydney, Ryan Johnston, Director of Buxton Contemporary in Melbourne, chairs a session with the artist Kathryn Brimblecombe-Fox. I hope you enjoy this video.
In Western Queensland, and have spent a long time as an adult in Western Queensland, so landscape is a very common theme. I've got a great interest in cosmology, the scientific study of the universe, so cosmic perspectives, cosmic ideas. I've also got a long-term interest in technology, and the reason for that will be discussed a little bit further along. About 8 to 10 years ago, I developed a keen interest in existential risk posed by emerging technologies, so those technologies that could see the demise of the human species or civilization collapse. And then in 2017, I graduated from the University of Queensland, having done a research master's in art history and cultural studies. So the cultural studies component included reasonably extensive research, including technical research, into militarised drones, surveillance and increasingly autonomous systems. So all of that gives you a bit of background about why this person is interested in this area. So, the airborne militarised drone and its ground-based operators rely on interconnected digital and cyber systems that extend from the subterranean, the undersea, to land, into sky and into space. These interconnected systems enable such things as communication, global positioning, image relay, target identification and weapons deployment. The interconnected nature of contemporary technology also enables the conscription of civilian devices such as mobile phones and computers, yours, into the employed militarised activities. Advances in machine learning and artificial intelligence are contributing to increasingly autonomous operative systems, and these developments have triggered global debates about the decreasing in human involvement in drone operation. Interconnected systems and the reduction of human input proliferate in ways that aid and abet perpetual war and what geographer Gregory calls the everywhere war. As fellow geographer Ian Shaun notes, security and policing activities are increasingly militarised by the deployment of dual-use technology devices and systems. In a world where activities such as cyber terrorism, transnational crime and various kinds of illicit trade intersect with threats of national and global security and the sanctity of sovereign borders and political systems, the contemporary battlefield is a hybrid landscape of both the real and the virtual. This battle space, not battlefield, positions humanity in a perpetual state of war, where fluctuating degrees of conflict, I would argue, foreclose the end of war scenario. At the very least, interconnectivity and the increasingly dual-use civilian and military capabilities of contemporary technology predispose humanity to persistently present offensive and defensive readiness for war. One way or another, the global landscape could be described as militarised, setting the scene for an already militarised future. So here I've got Australia, it's black or dark, it could mean that it no longer exists. But this is a virtual rendition of the aftermath of war, and binary code repeats or instructs landscape around the coastal line. I have got Reaper drones and satellite infrastructure in this drone landscape. I offer my paintings as critical resistances to forces that expose humanity and the planet to the threat of perpetual everywhere war in the 21st century. In this talk, I focus on what I call new or droned landscapes and how I see them as revealing this everywhere war. For me, signals are not neutral. As enablers of interconnectivity, I see them as generating new, albeit invisible, silent, or hidden topographies that volumetrically net the landscape, the planet from land into sky and into space. I suggest that we are actually held hostage by these new topographies, but we're not totally aware of it. Broadly, there are 5 ways I attempt to expose this infiltration and occupation of landscape. Firstly, I use cosmic perspectives as revelatory devices. Secondly, I attempt to make visible the invisible signals that enable the connectivity through our extended environment. Thirdly, I try to rethink the use of anthropomorphising words like vision to describe a drone's capabilities. Fourthly, I often position the tree of life with the airborne drone, or indications of its presence, i.e. signals, to actually talk about or pose questions about existential risk posed by these emerging technologies. My fifth resistance is a deliberate choice to use paint, an analogue medium that can critically reflect upon and depict contemporary technology, digital and cyber technology, without actually using it, and therefore not be drawn into some kind of complicity. In this talk, I focus on the first two, my use of cosmic perspectives and my desire to make visible the invisible signals. But before I go on, this is the landscape of my childhood. So you can see it's a naturally treeless black soil plain on the Darling Downs between Dalby and Jimbour in Queensland. At night time, you could not see the difference between the land and the sky. You can see the distance was very much a felt experience. Distance was my playmate. And in this landscape, even though I'd never been in a plane above it, I knew what it looked like from above. I knew what our farmhouse looked like from above. And flying will be something, the sense of flying will be something that actually is integrated into my artwork. This photograph here is rain falling, but it's so hot it evaporates before it reaches the ground. So that gives you some idea of my childhood landscape. These photographs here give you a bit of a hint about why I'm interested in technology. My father, whilst a farmer, was also very keen, from the age of 12, ham radio operator, amateur radio. So this is just a small section of the gadgets that he had in his ham shack. He was a farmer, so he had a shed as well. Here, in the early 60s, this is this aerial being built and the various antenna being constructed off it. This is his ham shack, and these are 3 aerials with various antenna. I grew up in a house with the latest gadgets and gizmos. We had communication devices in our vehicles in the 60s. Dad would have known I was born in the 60s. And when cabins were put on tractors and harvesters, they had communication devices. We heard international, national news long before mainstream news outlets even reported on it because of the international network that Dad had through his ham radio. So that just gives you a little bit of a background. I'll take this. So back to cosmic perspectives. What do cosmic perspectives do? Here, this is the sort of triangulated communication between ground control stations, satellites, communication of GPS, the drone, and then its target, the tree of life. In my paintings, cosmic perspectives afford the opportunity to propel the viewer in imagination to temporal and spatial distances beyond the current reach of the airborne militarised drone. By inviting viewers to fly with me around and beyond the drones and their partnering satellite infrastructure, the human gaze is turned back upon them. In a sense, surveillance is retrieved as a human capability. This capability is literal and metaphoric, imaginational and visionary. And here I briefly mention my aversion to the word or the term drone vision. Vision as a human capability is not just about seeing with eye and eyeball and pupil. It's also about imagination, dreaming, daydreaming, visionary thinking. A drone cannot do that. A drone scopes. Just like a camera or a gun has scopes, a drone is a flying matrix of them. So I prefer scope in the sky to eye in the sky. I know scope in the sky is not as sexy as eye in the sky, but I think it actually opens up space to be really critical about the drone and not be forced into a kind of relationship with it because we used a humanising or an anthropomorphising term like vision. By inviting viewers to fly, wonder and imagination are revitalised in ways that resist the militarisation of imagination, evidenced, for example, in future of war rhetoric emanating from military personnel and defence departments around the world. This is the scopic gaze. So it could be a camera, it could be a gun, and here is the tree of life, so this sort of existential risk idea. Here I have a quote from the Australian Chief of the Army in his recently published future statement called Accelerated Warfare. I'm not going to read it, but I'll pick out a few words. Disruptive technologies, domain integration, accelerating environment, future warfare, speed of machines, future advantage, own the time. That's very interesting language. It's very clear that we're in an accelerating high-tech arms race, and it's becoming more and more evident. And because of robotics, artificial intelligence and machine learning in autonomous systems and swarm technology, militarised imaginations have already militarised the future. Certainly the future and time are dimensions already inhabited by anxiety, if not strategy. So here I've got Australia, it's gridded, forming kill zones and kill boxes for this particular accelerated warfare future statement. It's not moving. Here we have Rick Burr, Lieutenant Major Rick Burr, made this statement here. This is the first line of his last paragraph. We must pull the future towards us rather than wait for it. If that's not about creating some kind of strategy for the future and time, I don't know what is. So this painting was directly inspired by that particular line. I've flipped at the continent of Australia and it's perforated, so that either could be signalling or it could be a sign of attack. I've got the airborne drone and the satellite, I've got signals, and in binary code, future and life. With cosmic perspectives, like this one and my previous paintings I've shown, you can see that there is an occupation of land, sky and space that enables militarisable, which is very important because it's not just those that are consciously militarised, but it's the militarisable aspect of technology. So now I turn to Carl Sagan and his very famous quote, "In our obscurity, in all our vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves." This painting here was directly inspired after watching a General Atomics, an arms manufacturer, drone manufacturer, promotional video on the virtues or the vision capabilities, so-called vision capabilities of an airborne drone and its ability to pick up anomalies. And in the case they had 3 vehicles travelling from different directions, at distance, at speed, seemingly towards the same destination. This is a potential insurgent attack, but it could have been 3 family members rushing to the aid of another family member. So I've flipped that, I've taken a cosmic perspective, I've used the pale blue dot, and I've got grey eagle drones coming in at 3 different directions. What I'm trying to say is, with cosmic perspectives, does that open up our ability to see what anomalies we can't see because we're all embedded in this everywhere war? Here I place Carl Sagan's sage 20th century words with Lord Astronomer and founder or co-founder of the Centre for Studying Existential Risk at the University of Cambridge, Martin Rees's 2003 words. "Through malign intent and through misadventure, 21st century technology could jeopardise life's potential of foreclosing its human and post-human future." End of quote. However, as an astronomer and as a cosmologist, he actually sees the potential for the cosmic perspective. He says the cosmic perspective strengthens the imperative to cherish this pale blue dot in the cosmos. It should also motivate a circumspect attitude towards technical innovations that pose even a small threat of catastrophic downside. I take Rees's cautionary tone seriously by addressing issues of existential risk posed by emerging technologies, particularly militarised or militarisable technologies, into my creative practice. Another one with the pale blue dot and landscape either falling towards it or falling away from it. I've deliberately made it look like a suburban overview of a suburban kind of scene with parks and gardens and swimming pools, but the drones have replaced houses. Now to my resistance of making visible the invisible. I turn to, so this is my second resistance. So in these paintings, I've actually, you're not aware whether you're above or below, and this is the sense of flying. So you have the freedom to fly. So if you were thinking you were below this, then the sky is netted. If you're above it, you'd realise that the planet was netted. In each of them, the signals extend beyond the paintings so that they extend into this room. Military civilian dual-use capabilities of nodes such as satellites and geostationary or low Earth orbit, ground relay stations and mobile phone devices in infrastructure mean the signals that enable connectivity are also dual-use, or potentially so. I see these signals as radiating or netted lines that crisscross the landscape, penetrating the sky on their way into 5 minutes. Signals occupy the landscape, the biosphere and space in ways that could be described as a volumetric techno-colonisation of landscape, an insidious and invisible one. But even though landscape has changed, so is the way humans behave in this landscape. This is Creech Air Base in the United States, Ramstein Air Base in Germany, satellites, drones over the Middle East. In extreme cases, such as Yemen, northern Pakistan and Afghanistan, people are afraid of the sky and the flying watchtowers at harbours. That's Gladwell Shumayu's term. Taking a cosmic perspectival approach, I return to Voyager 1. So it left the solar system in 1990, and Voyager 2 has just recently left the heliosphere. In an age where human-made spacecraft are travelling in interstellar space, so beyond the solar system, it is an indictment on all of us that there are any people on Earth who are afraid of the sky. It is oxymoronic, representing a shutdown of perspective, metaphoric and literal. So this painting, you can see if you're above it, if you're an alien flying past Earth, Earth is walled by drones and their signals. If you're under it, you can't see the sky, but it could also be a cross-section of the landscape, with this as being the land, the horizon and the sky. So a complete occupation of space. Exposing signals also triggers questions about pervasive algorithmic influences. So in John Baudrillard, in 2003, a future will be possible to measure everything by the same extremely reductive yardstick, the binary, the alternation between 0 and 1. In this painting, Code Empire, which was inspired by an article written by Ian Shaw, I've got binary code repeating the word empire, radiating lines, this is the moon as well. So again, this kind of occupation of space. But the binary is a very reductive space that forecloses any kind of diversity. It's a space which is more controllable, and you can see that through a kind of pervasive, these new landscapes kind of indicate that. This last two slides, this one is called human. The human is instructed here in binary code. I very rarely use figures because I don't like to appropriate other people's stories if I haven't felt them, but this here is more about humanity. The crosshair, which I use a lot, and this kind of appropriation of the screen that a remote pilot might see, or if it's an autonomous system, may well be there, but we don't know. And I've used the tree of life as shadows to indicate that perhaps there's some hope. So I don't think that my paintings are not hope, but there's some kind of hope that this crosshair can't target them because of this tree of life shadow. And then this last photograph really sums up in many ways a lot of what I think about. So the eye in the sky is a false fake eye in the sky. It has a green pupil, like night vision, green surveillance. Its lashes are like signals. In fact, it is targeting something here through the false landscape that's created by other signals, surveillance and attack signals. This green cloud it plays on the idea of the cloud computing. So it's green, it's a surveillance green. There is nothing that can't be hacked or accessed, and it penetrates and it's targeting. However, the tree of life is also in the target zone. However, there's a freedom attached to it because the roots have extended underground and go beyond the painting. And the tree has actually penetrated the false landscape, and seemingly the false eye in the sky, the scope in the sky, can't actually see it. So this painting, in a way, brings together the 5 resistances, including the fact that it's actually a painting. If you're interested, I've got a portfolio of some of the works on paper here for you to look at if you would like to. So thank you.